Okay, today or tonight and tomorrow is something called Yud Tes Kislev in our Ashkenazi pronunciation. In Hebrew, Yud Tet, right? So the 19th of Kislev, right? Kislev is our Hanukkah holiday. The 25th is Hanukkah, the 25th of Kislev, and the 19th of Kislev is the special day. This is the day that the author of the Tanya, the Alter Rebbe, was released from captivity. He was imprisoned by Tsarist Russia. He was born in 1745, I think. This is like the same timing as the American Revolution is going on. In Russia, we're having a Hasidic revolution. And it's actually a really big deal because before this point, Jewish life in Europe reflected the Dark Ages. It was a lot of persecution. We're talking about the Pale of Settlement. Jewish people are impoverished. They're persecuted. There's pogroms. Their peasant neighbors hate them because they see them as more successful than them, and they're jealous of them and all that. But at the same time, they're persecuted more. So they're in a very tough spot, and it created a very kind of sad. Thank you so much. It created a little bit of a depressed experience for the Jewish people. Along with this was, because of all the poverty and all the way that it was set up, there was a lot of undereducation. People did not have access to Torah study. They didn't have the time, they didn't have the access, they didn't have the money. They were just simple Jews. And the intellectual class would look down upon the simple Jews, and there was this hierarchy a little bit. The Baal Shem Tov came along about, two generations before this, and and he started this revolution. So this was before the Alter Rebbe. This was his teacher's teacher. The Baal Shem Tov was the teacher of the Alter Rebbe. So, and he taught everyone. Are you familiar with the Baal Shem Tov? Have you heard of the Baal Shem Tov? So he taught everybody the beauty of the simple Jew, how every single Jewish person is equal, because we're all unified by our godly soul, which doesn't know any difference between knowing more Torah or knowing less Torah. So So I'm used to that vantage point, and I'm like, oh, I don't have that problem over there. Anyways, thank you.
If you want, maybe to use.
Yeah, if anybody wants to pour into a smaller cup or whatever. Anyways, the point of the matter is that there's this revolution that when we are talking about the mysticism of the Torah, then we start to realize that we're really all unified. And along with that came other revolutions at the same time, like the revolution of understanding that every single thing in this world is planned and executed with a grand plan. Even the little details is all preordained by God, which means we're in good hands. So all this is different sides of the same coin, which is revealing the spiritual truth of all of us. And then everything else becomes clear, which was for us it resonates so much. But 400 years ago, it was so revolutionary that there was opposition to it. And that brings us to the part of the story where the Alter Rebbe is teaching this mysticism, this Chassidus, and the intellectual class was very opposed. It could be maybe their power, right? Different aspects. Like there were many in this community, in this intellectual community, that were cautiously excited about it. Maybe they studied a little bit. They saw what was there. They saw this beauty. Some, of course, reacted with this like opposition and threat. They felt threatened by it. Now, in fairness, about 150 years before that, I think I'm getting my timing right, there was the false messiah of Shabtai Tzvi, who started out, which was what they saw as similar, mysticism and, and all this beauty and all this, like, ecstasy, and then it ended very, very, very badly. So they're rightfully cautious, yet some of them got toxic about it. And something that they did was that was super toxic was that they went to the Russian authorities and informed on the Alter Rebbe and told them that the Alter Rebbe was treasonous, which wasn't true. And the reason why, what they caught him on was sending money to Turkey, which he wasn't doing. He was sending money, which is actually coming up in this chapter. This chapter is so providential in that we're studying it today, because there's so many references back to the story. But he was sending charity to the impoverished Hasidic community in Israel, in Palestine. Actually, it wasn't even Palestine. It was part of the Ottoman Empire. So it was pre-Palestine. It was part of the Ottoman. It didn't have a name, right? He was sending money to the Jewish community there in Sfad, in Hebron, which we still have documentation, and we still have, their real estate connections. You can go to Israel and find these historical sites and everything of this time period. But he was anyway supporting them. And they took that and said, oh, because the Holy Land is part of the Ottoman Empire, he's sending money to Turkey, which was Russia's enemy, and framed him that way. And he was imprisoned, and he was sentenced to death, and the death became exile, and the exile became, less and less and less, and he was freed on this day. There's a lot more details to the story, but the main thing is that it was very clear to the Alter Rebbe and to the Hasidim that this imprisonment was with the pretext of the treason and all that, but it was really a spiritual blockage what was going on, and it was a manifestation of that. And the spiritual blockage was basically, is the world ready for this mysticism or not? Is the Alter Rebbe, breaching boundaries in a bad way, or is he revolutionary in a good way? And
when you say Alter Rebbe, you mean Rabbi Milubavitch?
I mean the first Rabbi Milubavitch, which is Admor HaZaken.
Okay.
And the Alter Rebbe is Yiddish for Admor HaZaken.
Okay.
It means the older, like the elder, the first.
And this is a different person than the Baal Shem Tov?
Yes.
Okay.
So it was 2 generations later. The Baal Shem Tov was the original revolutionary, and then he kind of started the process, and then there was the Maggid who continued, and then the Alter Rebbe who continued from him, but really took it to the next level.
And was the Baal Shem Tov in Tzfat?
No, Europe.
Wasn't there a thing that happened in Tzfat as
There was a
well?
lot of Kabbalah happening in Tzfat
Yeah.
simultaneously.
Okay.
And this is the community that the Alter Rebbe is supporting.
Okay.
I need to go do more historical referencing to figure out exactly which leaders were current. But it was a vis-a-vis kind of thing.
Can I ask one more question?
Yeah.
The Jewish people who were like a higher class level, were they also in
Europe.
but they weren't in the Pale of Settlement and those
All that,
communities.
yes.
They
yes.
were there. So
they were in the
different
same communities.
classes. Okay.
Yeah, so within one community, you would have the rabbi, you would have the shamash, who would take care of the synagogue, and you would have certain Torah scholars that would hold themselves more superior than the rest, who would sit in the back. They kind of talked down to them. They didn't know anything, right? The little, the almost like the peasant class. There was a peasant class.
And were those higher level educated Jews also being targeted by the
Anti-Semitism?
Yeah.
Equally,
Okay.
yeah. So everybody's in the same anti-Semitic boat. We're all Jews in that way, but within the community, there were societal nuances that were going on, and again, the Baal Shem Tov really opened the eyes of the Jewish community to see the truth of the matter, that we're all connected with our soul, and there really is no hierarchy. And that's actually, like, in the first 2 chapters of the Tanya, it talks about how the soul that's in every Jew. And if you look at it in this context of the story, you see how important this statement was.
So when you say no hierarchy, I don't know how to say hierarchy. So when you say all Jews are the same, so even the tzaddik, the Benoni, and Rashai, they are all the same.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
And then a lot of them, like my ancestors, that's when they left Europe and went to the United States.
As early as 1745, like maybe that's a little.
No.
That was more Columbus era. No, that was 1492. Wrong me. Whoa.
No,
But-
you're right. It
but
was
that's more like the
100
blue
years
line.
later.
Yeah.
Right. That
They started coming in the 1880s.
right.
I had family that came to North Carolina at that time as well.
Right. So this is like another like 100 years before that, and they were
And they
still
were being-
experiencing the pogroms. They must have gone on for hundreds
many
of
years. Many years. Our European story is full of suffering.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm actually now
Because we
reading
weren't
a series.
wanted there, right? We
I think
We're-
The story of the exile.
Yeah.
is playing out.
right.
Yeah.
We weren't. We were immigrants.
Suffering from beginning of time.
We're told that we had 4 exiles in all of history. So the first was the Egyptian. We had the story of Passover. Then we had the story of Hanukkah. Purim was first. Then the story of Hanukkah. And this current exile, the Roman exile, 2,000 years long. So that's what, the story of our history is really mostly exile.
It's like we've been hunted in every single era.
I know. I just bought this
Sorry,
series
yeah, you
for
were saying.
Rachalea that I loved as a kid, and actually the author expanded it now, so I'm rereading it and I'm just appreciating it so much. And he bases the story in Eastern Europe around this time, and it's so rich, where he really captures like the classes. He captures it, but he also has this fictional rabbi that leads his community in a very beautiful way. So it's very nice. But in any case,
Thank you.
yeah, sure.
Funny how, like, hundreds of years ago, they had all these rabbis that had all this mysticism knowledge, and the community wasn't yet ready to accept this knowledge. And now, when we are ready to accept this knowledge, we don't really have those rabbis to, like, we only studying from hundreds of years of knowledge.
That is such a interesting observation. I don't think it's coincidental. I think we have a
Like,
lot
they
more tools now.
worked on it before.
Yeah, to set us
make
up.
ready. Yeah, that's the word.
I think so. I know with the current Lubavitcher Rebbe, like, he gave us so much to learn, so much to digest, that we're still studying the things that he taught us over his 50 years of leadership. We're still studying. It's like it's a lifetime of study that he left us, that we now can use and take our matters, and take ownership of our journey.
It's like Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, how he studied and had all this knowledge, but nobody around was really ready to receive all this knowledge and information, like ready
Beautiful.
mentally,
True.
right? Now
True.
we are ready.
Yeah.
There is no one to really teach it, there is people to teach it, but nobody
But
really
using
receive
this.
the knowledge.
And what the Alter Rebbe did when he wrote the Tanya, he has in his introduction, he tells us that this is our tool. It's like a living book, like for our application and for us to grapple with and us to rumble with. Like, that's what he did for us, because he realized that he has a limited amount of time, even in his lifetime, let alone after he passes. So that's what he did with this book. And he wrote in the introduction that he's imbuing the words of this book with like in a living spirit. So about the imprisonment with this, what happened? Why Yud Kislev? Why this 19th of Kislev day is so special? We celebrate it as a holiday, as a Hasidic holiday. We call it the Rosh Hashanah of Hasidus, the New Year for Hasidus. Why do we celebrate it so much? Not just because he came out of prison. well, that's a celebration, but because it was the confirmation, the endorsement from above that this work is legitimate. It was the spiritual endorsement of the work. And we were told a story that while the Alter Rebbe was in prison, he had a spiritual encounter. He was visited by the Baal Shem Tov. And the Baal Shem Tov said, and the Alter Rebbe asked him, Ematai katimar, look, tell me when is the end of this exile? Like, until when? And the Baal Shem Tov replied, Lich sheyafutzu mayanatecha chutza, until you continue to spread the well springs of this Chassidus outward. And we sing this song about this line, and basically that was known to be the moment of the turning point of this spiritual thing going on. That, okay, you can tell there's some sort of endorsement starting, because the Baal Shem Tov said, when your well springs go forth, that's when it's going to end. So obviously the well springs going forth is a good thing. And then it started to play out, and there was a lot of miracles of the way that the Russians started to change their attitude, and they started to recognize the greatness of the rabbi that was imprisoned in their and they started to pay him deference, and things started to turn around until he was released. So that's this day. Now, okay, so what does the Alter Rebbe go and do? Writes us the Tanya. And this is the day that marks an annual study cycle. So we have that with Simchat Torah, where we study the Torah every year. Every week we read a parsha. So we have an annual study of the Tanya that begins on the day of the 19th of Kislev, and a little bit every single day, and you finish the cycle every year. So that's why I brought us out the cover page again, because on the day of the 19th of Kislev is the day that we study the cover page. And why do we study the cover page? Normally when we get a book, we read the cover, we might appreciate the graphic design, and then we move on. But with the Tanya, the cover page has a lot of depth to it that is like, it's actually like a micro introduction to, you can tell, like, what is, the Alter Rebbe is basically giving us an abstract, like a academic abstract of what he's setting out to do. So, in front of us we have the cover page. It says, Sefer Likutei Amarim. The fact that he's calling it Likutei Amarim, we call it the Tanya after the first word, but he's calling it a collection of teachings. And that shows his humility. And it's actually true, because throughout the Tanya, like, I'm going to go out and just estimate non-authoritatively that there's like 30% of it is literal quotations from all over the Torah. Like, there's obviously the Alter Rebbe's words and like his writing, but like interspersed with quotes all the way through, from the 5 books of the Torah to the prophets to the Talmud to the Shulchan Aruch to other from all over, from the Midrash, all over, showing that this is really the Torah. There's nothing new here. It's a new dimension, a new way to understand the Torah. And if you connect the dots throughout the Torah, you will see that this is being said. He also gives it a nickname entitled Sefer Shel Beinonim, the Book of the Intermediates. Now remember, in chapter 1 and 2, we learned about the 3 different types of people. We have Tzaddik, the Beinoni, and the Rasha. Tzaddik is the person who only experiences the infinite truth of their existence. They don't have, their animating soul is really plugged into the truth of it as well. So it doesn't have the concealment. It doesn't experience that, and its path is a different path. And the legend is that the Alter Rebbe wrote a book called Sefer Shel Tzadikim, and there was a very historic fire that unfortunately burned down the Alter Rebbe's other major work, which is the Shulchan Aruch, the Book of Jewish Law, which I have over there on the shelf, volumes of that. We have a small percentage of that Most of it was obliterated by the fire. And along with that is told that the Sefer Shel Tzadikim was also in that fire. But in any case, what we have is the Sefer Shel Beinonim. And that's for the intermediate. So the Rasha is the people that have are within their animating soul, that it has a say. So it's at the table. It's like we listen, we hear its voice, we take it seriously, and it's a factor in our lives. And that's most of the population. And then the Beinoni is where we're trying to get to. It's our life's work, and that's the person who maintains constant impulse control over his animal impulses, yet they will always be there. He will always struggle with something. It will always come into play in life. And this is actually going to become relevant in this very chapter. We're going to actually reference the fact that this is Sefer Shel Beinonim. And then the last paragraph is about it tells us, remember this is the abstract, and it says, compiled from the sacred books and from teachers of heavenly saintliness whose souls are in Eden, based upon the verse, Ki karov elecha hadavar me'od beficha ubelvavcha la'asoto. This is the verse of the Deuteronomy in the Torah that the Alter Rebbe is explaining. How is it very close to us in our mind and in our heart that we should do it? It doesn't seem close. It seems like really, really hard. And we've actually answered that question already. And today in chapter 25 is the conclusion of the answer. So another reason why it's very perfect that we're learning it today. And it says that it's going to explain it in the short way, the long short way, the short long way, which we've explained before. And the long short way was the way chapter 1 through 18, where we learned about meditation, we learned about impulse control, and we learned that instead of having to always impulse control, and we can also develop and meditate and generate an appreciation for the esoteric, for the God, for the infinite truth inside of us, so that our impulse control doesn't feel so forced. And that's the long, short way, that we can really align ourselves slowly with meditation, with concentration in this path. And then chapter 19 through 25 said, okay, but that's a life's work. So while you're on this path of constantly training yourself and studying and concentrating, there is a way you can get there today. And that's the way of channeling and harnessing your natural inborn love of God that you have. And that's what we have been studying in chapters 19 through 25. Today is chapter 25 where we get to conclude it. And we've studied and said that this natural love we were taught in chapter 19, we were given by the forefathers. It's in our generational inheritance, in our spiritual genes. And it's the aspect of our soul called chachma, called wisdom. And it's the wisdom that sees the truth. It can't even unsee it. It sees the truth. It's constantly eyes open to the truth of its existence, the infinite truth. That gets covered over. We're not always plugged in with that truth. We have the world concealment, which the chapters 21 and 22 explain to us, this concealment from the tzimtzum, from the contractions. And because of that, we don't experience the truth of our infinity every day. It's not in front of us, plain and simple. So we usually don't have access to that eyes open chachma that our soul has. When do we have access to it? When faced with a life or death spiritual situation. It's the fight or flight that we all have born into our psychological psyche, so we can understand in a psychological way how we can go about life. But when faced with a life or death situation, system override, we're not operating from regular ways. We are going into immediate save life situation. And of course that's it's not a perfect example because that's not healthy. But the example is helpful because this fight or flight is there for a reason, to save a life. And if there's a car, if we have a child running into the street, we will get that child back. We will run. We have mothers lifting a car off their baby, right? It will do the work because it's faced with the very black and white survival instinct and unleashes incredible power. So spiritually, when a Jewish person in the past, in our history, with the same period of time, the Crusaders in the early 1600s, right? Isn't that right? And then the Cossacks and all this terrible persecution that happened in this time, we were faced with life or death, convert over the cross, or die over the cross, or be slit with a sword, right? And what did the Jewish people do? Even the ignorant class, even the simple people, they chose to die because it was so clear to them that it's either die a physical death or abandon their deepest truth, which is eternal. And it was like, duh, like this is my eternity. Like it wasn't even a choice. It was just an automatic override that the natural soul unleashed. And so what is the short, long way? What is this way from 19 through 25 is harnessing this truth and expanding it to apply to non-life or death situations. So in other words, if I love my child so much that I'll lift a car, I can also have a little more patience. That's pretty much what we're saying. If we are going to die for God, then we can also say a blessing over the food. We can also give a little more tzedakah than we would have, right? That's what it's saying. So let's go into the chapter 25, and it's going to, okay, we'll read a tiny bit, and then we're gonna do something really interesting. Okay, so starting at the top, V'zeu shekatuv. You have this? Want to share it? I'll share it with you.
Yeah.
And this is then the meaning of the verse. Ki karov elecha hadavar me'od v'gomer. That this thing is near to you in your mind and in your heart. You should do it. Notice, the word doesn't say it's easy. Nobody ever said it was easy, but it's close. Why is it close? Because at any time and moment, a person is capable and free to rid himself of the spirit of folly, and which renders him insensitive to the separation between himself and God caused by the sin and forgetfulness. And I'm going to skip the next chapter. And he is always able to remember and arouse his love for the one God that is certainly, undoubtedly latent in his heart. That's why it's near. Remember, not easy, near. Because it's right there in us. We have it. We just need to uncover the rationalization of this ruach shtus, the spirit of folly that we learned about in chapters 23 and 24, and uncover the truth. It's close. Sometimes the things that are so close, yes, so far, right? They're hard, but it is close. It's right here. And when we have that moments of inspiration, like we talked about, we find that closeness. It's like obvious all over again. And I don't know how I've experienced that. It's like, oh my God, of course. Like that's really who I am. And it feels close. But then of course, we get the Ruach Shtus again. We get the concealment that God built into our life to make it hard. So close, but hard. Let's talk a little bit about the Ruach Shtus. What does it do? It puts us in a state of denial. Okay, now I actually want to take a minute and go into a tangent and talk about teshuvah. Okay, this is really, really cool exercise. So, teshuvah is repentance, right? What is teshuvah? We built into this system concealment, and the concealment makes it really, really hard, and we are basically bound to slip up. Okay, it's like any obstacle course or any challenge we put forth to our children. We know they can make it in the end. We know they have the ability to withstand it, but we also know they're going to make mistakes, like riding a bike, like anything in life. It's hard, and mistakes are inevitable. So we have built into that teshuvah, repentance. We have the return. Why is teshuvah? This is so important to translate teshuvah as return, because it really taps us into what's really happening. We are returning to what we know is true. What is true? the chachma of our soul, knowing its infinity, knowing that the truth, the real truth of our existence is the fact that we are God, that we are infinite, that is us. And when we sin, it's because we've allowed ourselves to believe that it's just a minute. It doesn't really matter. It's just temporary.
It's very hard to comprehend that
Yeah.
we are God and we are infinity. It's very hard. like,
Close, yet hard.
I know that we are, but trying to think about it is just so hard to understand that. No?
Yes. Infinity? I mean, it's a crazy concept.
Right.
Like, how do you wrap your brain
It
around
is.
that?
It's absolutely
So hard.
crazy. It's crazy. Yet, we have that basically superpower, superhuman. We have it. And it's our deepest truth.
When
It's
you
our
let-
infinite truth.
When you like let go and you just let it be.
You can find it when you let go, when you tap into it, when you with the long short way, when you take away all the noise and you tune into it, or even with just remember that it's there. So when you like the short long way, or even like when you find your natural love and you find it, you can experience it.
Like that joyful feeling that just rises up in you every so often, like in nature or whatever, and you're like, oh. And you feel like you're transported into some infinite place where you're like, I don't know where I am right now, but this feels really good.
Yes.
Maybe that's
close.
tapping into
Maybe
it.
that's really, really close. And in a way, and you know what, we will use that example of finding that love. When you have a moment of joy really comes very close to this is a good example to experience a spiritual infinity. Even though joy is it depends. If it's joy in God, it's spiritual. If it's joy in other things, it's psychological. But it's all part of the same. You're right. It really does tap into it. And when we experience joy, everything falls away, right? It's just me and this connection, or me and this moment. A lot of times it's connection. Like when I read in the book, like an example, when a child says, I love you, it's just like everything isn't important anymore. It's just like, if that moment feels infinite, it feels that even though the I love you took about 2 seconds, it taps into an infinite truth. And that moment of like connection with your child or with a spouse, it feels like again, everything else doesn't matter anymore. It's just you and this infinite truth and this connection and this joy, and that's the truth. That infinite moment, that's truer than the struggles that you experience, than the other stuff. So what happens with the spirit of folly? What happens? We say, if I don't really, let's say in a relationship, if I don't take that person seriously, or if I say something rude, or if I do something I know they hate, it's just a minute. It's like, I really love them. They know that, right? That's what the spirit of folly says. It doesn't matter. Or like, with the diet, I always say like, it's not that bad. You can eat the cookie and you'll be fine. Actually, I did eat the cookie 2 weeks ago and I wasn't fine, so it wasn't true. But like I told myself it's going to be fine, right? That's the Ruach Shtus. That's the spirit of folly. It says you don't have to really pay attention to your child this moment. It's just a minute. But what happens because of that minute that we said was just a minute? We come out of alignment. And that out of alignment is not a minute. It really affects. And we're out of alignment with our real truth, which is that we do love our child, or we do love our spouse, or we do love God, right? That's our truth, but we're out of alignment with our truth. So for God, he's like, okay, like when are you going to come back around? For him, we're always there. But for us, we feel out of alignment. And that effect, and then in the example of like human relationships, then it's sometimes we get into really yucky spaces where one thing leads to another thing, it leads to another thing, and we're like, how did we get here when we really want to be here? It's because we allowed ourselves to think, oh, it's not going to matter. Oh, it's not going to matter. Oh, it's not going to matter. But actually, it does matter. And when something is important to your loved one and you don't respect it, then it does matter. And even if you know in your heart you love them, when you don't put that into action, it has an effect. Or when you say something mean, it has an effect. Even if you know the truth. Does that make sense?
And these are all examples, like it's not just about your relationship with God. It's about your relationship with other people. It's about your relationship with yourself. It's like all of these things.
It's a really good question. I'm going to say yes, but of course there's nuance, right? It's not the same. God gave us the Torah. He gave us the mitzvot of between him and God, and we have mitzvot between us and others.
Right.
Right? Those are also mitzvahs.
Right.
So yes, it is included.
That's
and
a
actually,
lot. That's just a lot.
It is. It's even more than that.
It's even
But-
more than a lot.
And I'm going to bring in, I was going to get to this later, but I'll bring it in now. The Alter Rebbe, the reason why he calls this book Sefer Shel Beinonim is because he's writing this book to the Beinoni. He's just going to assume, maybe for clarity purposes, that we're a Beinoni and that we're not actually saying mean stuff ever. Like, that's not what we struggle with, right? He's going to assume that we are doing all the 613 mitzvahs, and really what we have to work on is nuance.
Is what?
Is nuance. Really, and actually it's the thing we're going to read later. We'll skip to it. And literally, and we're going to go a little bit tiny bit out of order.
He thinks we're way further down the path
Yes.
than we actually are.
Yes.
So
Yes.
like, where's the book for us?
Yeah, no, it's not a Sefer Shel Rishaim. It's
Aha.
not. It's not. Because he believes in us.
Okay.
You know how, like, when
He
you
didn't
put your
write the book
child,
for
no,
the-
yeah, you put your
for the-
child in the gymnastics course that, like, you know they can do it, right? Meanwhile, they're like, I don't know if I can, I don't know if I can. And they're like falling all the time.
Right.
But he's like, no. Keep your eyes on the goal. You know, it's even like when my mother taught me how to drive. And she's like, if you look at the dotted lines, you're going to swerve. You have to look ahead. Right? So he's giving us Sefer Shel Beinonim. He's just going to assume that we're there.
Okay.
And we're going to find ourselves there. So, in the what I printed out here, I'm trying to find it. I think it's in the second page. So, besides for not, we focused a little bit in the past chapters about not doing things that God doesn't want us to do, but we can also use this hidden love to do the things God does want us to do, and not just do them because the Alter Rebbe is assuming we're already doing them, but he says you can actually motivate yourself. Likewise, in the category of doing good, to strengthen himself like a lion with might and determination of the heart against the evil nature which weighs down his body and casts him as a sloth, which stems from the element of earth that is in his animal soul. This laziness prevents him from exerting his body energetically with every type of effort and strain in the service of God that entails effort and toil. For example, chapter 14-15 about effort. For example, to labor in the Torah with deep concentration and also orally so his mouth will never cease from Torah study. I'm skipping a bit. So too with regard to serving God in monetary matters as in the duty of charity. And in similar matters that entail great effort, where one must struggle with the evil inclination and its wiles, which seek to cool the ardor of the man's soul, claiming that he ought not to anticipate his money in the case of charity or his health in matters requiring physical exertion. It is very easy for a person to resist and subjugate his nature. Whoa, I'm like going a mile a minute. So in other words, what I'm trying to say, the Alter Rebbe is saying, that let's say in relationships, you do something to hurt your partner, it's going to affect your relationship, for sure, right? You do something, let's say you do everything right, and you don't do anything wrong, your relationship can be fine, but it can be so much better if you put the extra mile into the good that you do. Like if you want to celebrate a birthday and you just go out to like a restaurant or whatever, versus if you plan it in advance and you send an invitation, or you go to somewhere extra special and you do little details along the way and you put your real heart into it, right? Or with a child, you can make them their lunch, or you can give them their lunch with a smile, and you can put a note inside and say, "Mommy loves you," right? Anything that you do, you can do it, and then you can do it. So the Alter Rebbe is saying that we can actually expand, if we get rid of the spirit of folly that says, it doesn't matter, just check the box, it's good enough. The spirit of folly says, it's not going to matter if you hurt them. The spirit of folly says it's not going to matter if you just do it bare bones. It's all coming from the spirit of folly that says it's not going to affect your relationship.
But we live in a finite world, and there's only so many hours in the day, and there's only so much effort you can put into, if you've got to make lunch and then the next thing is the next thing, at some point you have to make a choice. I can't do everything 150%.
So I'm using the note as an example. Like, I'm not saying
It
that
is
if
an
you
example,
don't write a note, then you're not loving your child. What I'm saying is that wherever the spirit of folly finds itself, and it knows where to test you, and you know when it's testing you. And it's not about, the note is an example.
Totally, but even...
Yeah. But like, let's say, when you have that resistance in you, or you have that that apathy that comes and that says, it doesn't even matter. Like, why are you even putting the effort into it? That voice.
The negative self-talk.
The negative self-talk. Wherever, obviously, somebody else's flow is not your flow.
Right.
So you don't have to adopt other people's flow. If their flow looks like putting notes in lunchboxes, great. Like, there's somebody on Instagram that I follow that I'm like, are you serious? Like, she happens to have a TV show, so it makes sense that she's doing these lunchboxes. But I'm like, but really? Like, that's definitely not my path. Like, I'm not doing heart-shaped little cheese things with the thing and the thing and the thing.
Sometimes those things have consequences, and they don't end up being what you intended. Like, sometimes your kid then expects that, and then when you don't do it, they think you don't love them.
And that's when your spirit of folly will not work in that area. You'll see that if that's the case for you, if it's a negative thing, if it's taking you away from what really matters,
Right.
Your spirit of folly is not going to be telling you, that doesn't matter. Your ego is going to tell you, that matters so much. And then you're going to have to realign yourself with what you're really resistant to, which could be just having the conversation that is supposed to be happening with whoever it is that's supposed to be happening.
Right.
In other words, you know yourself. And where somebody else might need to work on spending more time with their children, another person might need to work more on showing up in the workplace, another person might need to work more on, showing up for themselves, another person might need to do a little bit of everything. And, you know where your work is, and your spirit of folly is going to try to get you away from that work.
Mm-hmm.
That's the point. Yeah, because it's hard, because the concealment is supposed to be hard, because that's how it's designed to be hard, so that when we do it, it actually feels amazing, right? So that's the point of the spirit of folly. And I brought out this point of like going the extra mile, just to point out, the Alter Rebbe wants us to know that it's not only about checking boxes. It's about doing whatever it is that we need to do with a full heart, with effort. Effort is required, right? And the spirit of folly is going to tell us not to put effort in the very things we need to be. So that's this. Okay, but then you touched upon something so on point with this chapter. It's all over the chapter, beginning, middle, and end. And it's about this idea of time. You said we don't have time, right? Time, we are finite beings. We are the result of concealment, contraction, physical world that operates from the rules of time and space. And actually, I was reading this philosophical explanation that time and space are deeply intertwined. This is very interesting way to look at it. That time, how do we measure time? Change in form, right? How do they do carbon dating? Change in form. That's in an extreme way. But how do we even aging, change in form, water freezing, water melting, water boiling, whatever it is. Form is changing all around us. That's the one constant, right? The one constant of life is that there is change. That's the rules that God created the world with. Form, space, time, change. And we are tied to that. Yet, we have a part of us that's not. And that's the part of us that is connected to infinite truth. That the real truth is pre-contraction, pre-concealment from the way God sees it, and I'm going up, but it's really everywhere, right? Because there's an up-down, right? From the way God sees it, it's all the same. Now, yesterday, here, there, it's all God.
The different forms.
The different forms, it's all different forms of the same thing. It's almost like the atom can change, like molecular change, right? It's all, you can all break it down to the atom, right? And the atom can be broken down to something from nothing. And the something from nothing creation that God created, right? Because it's all the same, something from nothing. It all comes down to the atom. The atom is all created from zero, which is what we believe with the story of, God creating the world. So it's all God. So from our perspective, from our within Earth, within the matrix, we're all bound by time and space. And therefore, when we do something negative, it has an effect. Mm-hmm. When we do something positive, it has an effect. When we get out of alignment, it has an effect. Because we do need to work with time. In fact, the mitzvahs are bound by time. We light the candles before Shabbat. That's time. We actually consecrate time when we do that. We elevate time when we use our time in that way. But yeah, no, of course, we are time, right? But we get this ability to connect with beyond time, with our soul. And when do we really need to use that infinite power? Teshuvah. Because when we do teshuvah, how in possibility can we do repair? How can you repair? If you've said something, you said it. It happened, and nothing you do is going to change the fact that those words came out of your mouth. How do we repair? How is it even possible? The way it's possible is because we have infinite power. And when we tap into the infinity, we go to the place where God is. And where God is, time doesn't matter. Where God is, you were always connected. Before you said that thing, after you said that thing, the truth is that you're always with me. And when we align, we put effort into teshuvah, like it's actually really hard, and we realign ourselves with what's really matter. We do it in our relationships too. Mm-hmm. When we say, okay, I'm sorry I said those things. The truth is that I love you. The truth is that I don't want to hurt you. And when we do that realignment, we're going back in time. And we're actually not just going back in time, we're going beyond time at all. Because we're going to the timeless truth that we are with God. And God is with us. And that's the way He sees us. And so we look at it for a minute the way He sees us. And we say, yeah, that's where I want to be. And God will always accept teshuvah. And that's what it says in this verse, in the Tanya, it says, anybody who does teshuvah will be accepted. So why are we, the amazing thing, we're looping back around, using this time conversation back into the context, okay? It's a little bit of a mind game. So, our spirit of folly uses this truth against us. It says, you can make mistakes because guess what? You can fix them. So what's the big deal if you make a mistake? If it's just a moment, right? Time, right? We're in time. It's just a moment. You can make a mistake. So, and then just say sorry after. But if that was really, really true, if that was the truth that we really believe in, then why would somebody ever sacrifice his life? If they can just say, I'll bow to the idol, and then I'll say sorry after, and then I'll be with God again. But for some reason, the spirit of folly has no access to us when we're in that spiritual fight or flight, because it's not really truth. The real truth is that we won't even deny it for a minute, even if we can say sorry after. And so the fact that we don't delude ourselves into using that mechanism for bowing to idols means that we can actually come back to the spirit of folly with other things too and say, I know I can say sorry, but I don't want to be out of alignment even for a minute. I know God will accept my forgiveness. I know that He's beyond time. And I know that it doesn't matter what I do, He will always love me and He will always accept me back. But on my end, I want to stay in alignment. We have it with our relationships, right? I know that I can say sorry to my loved one and they'll forgive me. I know that. We're securely attached. But I love them so much, I don't want to hurt them even for a minute, even for a finite minute. So when we align so the Alter Rebbe is saying the short, long way is when we expand that ability to be so plugged in with our truth that we don't want to deny it for a minute with every little thing in life. And that is hard. And therefore we have the other way, which is the more concrete, methodical, conviction-based way. And together, we utilize this way, we utilize that way, and we use it on our growth mission throughout life. I want to conclude the chapter. I don't even know if I printed it out. When I was printing out, I was like in indecision of what I should print and what I shouldn't. Oh, yeah, it's there on the back page. So, when we do a mitzvah, and I'm just going to talk, and you can look at the words. When we do a mitzvah, it's like a motivational piece here. We are aligning with infinity. Here it says, at the top, thus his soul. And I'm just going to read the bold, and you can read in between, to yourself. Thus his soul, both the divine and the animating souls and their garments, will be united in perfect unity with the divine will and with the infinite light of God. So the infinite light has a name. It's called Or Ein Sof, the light of Ein Sof, the light of never ending. And to me, that word Or Ein Sof is so much more descriptive than infinite light. I don't know why, but it's just like this never ending, ever, ever, ever light, right? We get to connect with that. So it's basically saying everything that I've explained in the words. And this is expressed like in its like entirety, and it's like the perfect expression of this when we do a mitzvah. Every part of us, like we've been learning about in these past 19 through 25 chapters, we align every part of us, our physical limbs, our power of movement, our mind, our feelings, our godly soul, and our animal soul with God. When we're doing a mitzvah, we're like an expression of infinity. And we get to stay in alignment with this infinity as long as we're not doing anything to block it. So that means, to answer your question that you've so rightfully asked, what about shopping? What about eating dinner? What about work? What about doing the dishes? What about everything we do in mundane life? If we're in spiritual flow, it's part of that flow. And we're bringing our animal soul and our physical, like the middle ground of the klipa, we're bringing it along with us, and we're elevating it. We're aligning even that with infinity. This is what God wanted. This is his goal. This is Dira B'Tachtonim, his abode in this physical world, where he's like, this is the objective. You're doing it, guys. Like you're aligning all the physical with this beautiful light of. Only when we get out of alignment, like when we do something that's opposing God's will, opposite of the mitzvahs, that's when we get out of alignment, and then we need to get back in. We do the teshuvah. But anything we do in this alignment, anything we do, whether it's taking everything that's involved with taking care of the people that are in our care, anything we do to sustain our bodies and the way they do mitzvahs, eating, wearing clean clothes, shopping for clothes, everything we do is part of it. It's all part of it. And with that, I will conclude. And any questions? Yeah.
No, I think I understand. But you still have to make choices. That's what's the challenge, right? Is do I do this thing or this thing? They're both fine. They're both good, even.
It's not easy. Choosing between easy choices are when it's so clear, It's like, duh, right? That's not the hard part, the hard stuff. The hard stuff is when it's like, this is good and that's good. What do I do? And part of life is having that dilemma, and part of life is figuring out where to put our energy,
Right.
and figuring out where is the resistance coming from, the spirit of folly? Is the resistance coming from maybe because I really need to be realigned with that? Like, it's not easy. And in fact, I'm going to pause this. So you have to follow your own advice, where you are accepting that you may make a mistake and making the choice that is the most right to you, with what you know, with what you feel at that moment.
Yeah.
And then we can also give a prayer, right? When we're in those places, we can also pray and say, please Hashem, help me align with where you want me to go.
Yeah.
May it be blessed. And then you put yourself into it, and then you see where it takes you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But we do have the guide of the Torah. Actually, we can look at the Torah, the mitzvot. They're very, very detailed, and we can look at them as like limiting us. Like, there's a famous mashal, a famous parable of like a bird. And this bird's like, I'm trying to walk, and I'm being weighed down by these wings, right? I'm like trying to walk, and like, wait a minute, use the wings to fly, right? So we can look at the Torah like, oh my God, like it's giving me so many limitations. Or you can be like, oh, it's giving me guidelines with which I can now follow and fly. Yeah.
Yeah, you can learn from it.
Yeah. Okay.